Hello and welcome back to Flat Caps and Classics. Firstly, thank you to all the new subscribers that we've had. I'm sorry that you've not seen me for a week or two now, but things really have moved on with our green Roadster. 1977, for those of you who've not seen the other videos that we've made so far, please do go and have a look back at the 4 or so videos that we've made so far. I'm well and truly on with the rebuild of our green Roadster. I did pause for a bit because I mentioned in the last video I wanted to concentrate on getting the blue GT finished, and it nearly is. It runs, it doesn't drive yet because we still need to do clutch bleeding and brake bleeding and things like that. And we have 1 or 2 snagging details that need going through. But it starts, it sounds lovely, we've got good oil pressure, there's no exhaust leaks, there's an oil leak of the new oil cooler that I put in, but again, that's something that we can solve. So I'm really pleased with that, and over the next couple of days, hopefully we'll be finishing that off. So I'm well and truly back on with our 77 Roadster now. You'll see we've moved them back. The Roadster is now on the ramp, and that's one of the reasons that I've been able to put things on like the exhaust, which is on its brackets. It's not bolted up to the manifold. That's something that I want to get done today. But one of the main things that I want to do today is put on the fuel pump. You remember in the second film that we made, we had a new fuel tank. I had a new fuel tank delivered. That's been on for a while now. The sender unit is now in a new sender unit, and the pipework or the wiring is in for all that. So what I need to do is to put the fuel pump in. Now, that's the original one. Well, that's the one that came with this car. It's an SU fuel pump, and I know many of you will be familiar with them. They were put on so many cars, and in some cases they still are with the older cars, and they, in their day, were brilliant. Now, I suspect, judging by the look of this one, this was probably the one that this car had when it was new. As you can see, it's very crusty, but more to the point, it doesn't work. You can buy rebuild kits for these. There's valves and there's vacuums in there, and they move up and down, and it provides ultimately very good fuel pressure. But there is now, and I've found, a very good alternative. So we're not going to use that. Instead, I've bought this. Now, I know it doesn't look very similar to it, but it does exactly the same job. And the beauty of this fuel pump, which I bought from an MGB supplier, and this is the second one of these I've bought because I put one in the blue GT and it works brilliantly. It's solid state. There are no moving parts in this, and it just means that it's maintenance free. You haven't really got to worry about it. You can leave the car in the safe, hopefully the safe knowledge that if you come back to it a few weeks later, nothing will have seized inside the fuel pump. They are brilliant. This was, I think, £69 instead of the 100 and odd for a new SU pump. So for a few pounds more than it would cost to rebuild the original one, we've got a brand new one. It's literally a positive and negative wire. One fuel pipe in from the tank, one fuel pipe out to the engine. It plugs in to the same space using the same fixings as the SU. It's literally a plug and play. So I'm really looking forward to getting that in so we can get the fuel system finished on this car. The other day I did put the copper fuel line in, and that's all bracketed up into the engine, through to the fuel filter and to the carburetor. So I'm pleased with that. So now it's time to get this in. So you'll know way back when we put the loom, the rear loom in the car, and I have the 2 wires, a black one and a white one, corresponding to these. I know these colours are different, but bearing in mind this isn't the original colouring that would have come out with the car. Now, the pump needs to come in from underside, but the first thing I need to do, and it's easier to put it in this way, is to put the big grommet in here, and that's what the pump slides into like that, through here, and then there's a huge Jubilee clip which is missing, and I do need to get one. A huge Jubilee clip which goes around and clamps it in. So the first thing to do, and hopefully it won't prove too much of an issue, is to get this rubber grommet in. It is quite pliable, but it is a very tight fit for obvious reasons, because this is open to the elements the other side of this, so you certainly don't want any road dirt or moisture coming through here. So that's starting to go in. So what I'll do is I'll get this in, and then we'll get the car up on the ramp and push the pump in and get the pipes connected. Yeah, that's going in nicely. A little bit more. I did have a screwdriver to use just in case I wanted to, but obviously you're in danger of puncturing the rubber. And this is, as I say, really quite pliable, so you should be able to get that in. There we are. Good. Right, that's the grommet in. The wires, the cables are there, ready to receive. So, let's get the car up on the ramp and get this fuel pump in. Right, so the grommet's in, we know, let's put this in, and you'll see, as I mentioned before, we've got an in hole and an out hole, if you like, and they are clearly marked. This won't come up on the camera, but you've got an arrow pointing out and an arrow pointing in. So clearly, this is where the pump takes its feed from the fuel tank, and then this is where it squirts it out down the car into the carburetors. So first of all, take these rubber bungs out, and instead of using brass fittings, which is what the SU pipe uses, plastic fittings, plastic washers as well, nothing to corrode, and just simple as that to put in with just a bit of a tighten. Not overly tight, but there we are. Clearly we're going to check for leaks. The first thing we'll do is, before we even try and start, before we get the engine going, is we'll turn the ignition on and make sure there are no leaks so that we can solve things. But this is exactly how I did it on the GT. And there we are, ready to receive the two pipes. I think it might be easier looking at this. I want to put the fuel pipe that goes through into the car on first. It's just going to make it easier when I can actually hold this properly and do it with two hands. So push that on, and I've got a new fastener that we can just do up. Whoops. Trying to do this away from a workbench is more difficult than it seems. Actually, why don't I just try and do that first? Now I know, there will be someone saying, oh yeah, but you're not replacing it with the original. Well, no, but my argument would be I'm replacing it with something that actually is going to be more efficient. And it doesn't get seen. It's not like, preparing a car that has to be the right colour and has to be matching numbers or anything like that. Remember, this is a rebuild rather than a restoration, but at the same time making sure that it's in good shape. I mean, the idea is I'm going to be selling this car when it's finished. So I want it to be right, and I want the new owner to be happy. There we are. That's all nice and tightly on there now. So what I want to do, wiggle that through the grommet. And there's a nice bit of friction there, which I'm pleased about, because obviously it shows that the grommet is working. When we get the Jubilee clip in there, that will be fine. Right, good. So there's the pump in. I'm just going to feed the fuel line, and again I'll be putting brackets, a holding bracket, along the side of the battery box to make sure that this stays secure. We don't want a fuel line flapping around. We don't want any line flapping around, let alone the fuel line, and then slide it onto the pipe, the solid copper that takes it up to the front of the car, into the engine bay, and then through into the carburetors. And all it needs now is to tighten up this bolt, this clamp, and that should be this part of the fuel line done from the pump to the car. Clearly what we need to do now is to make sure that we get fuel to the pump from the tank. Clearly one of the most important things is to make sure that the pipe goes as far on to the join as is possible. You certainly don't want to risk any leaks or anything like that. And then of course you've got to be Houdini to be able to do everything up. Right, good. So we've got two pipes on the pump, and theoretically if we were to put this end of the pipe into a bucket of fuel or water or whatever it may be, and wire the pump up and get it started, it would deliver fuel into the engine. But clearly this needs to go into the tank. It's far too long, and it only needs to go just around the corner. But remember, I bought 3 meters of this fuel pipe because, as I say, I've used it for other bits and pieces, and I used some of it on the GT as well. So we need to cut it to length. So you can see new sender unit, and the fuel gauge is in there as well. The fuel sender unit and the gauge, as well as the feeder for the pump. So the aim really is you don't want the pipe really tightly wrapped around the fuel tank, because you want to avoid any possibility of kinks or restricting the flow of fuel. But at the same time, you don't want it too baggy, because clearly you don't want cables flapping around while you're driving around. And I will, just for sort of belt and braces, put a P-clamp onto this pipe at the top where it fixes onto the tank, just to make sure that it doesn't flap around. So, and this is really done by eyesight rather than anything else, but I reckon if we cut it about there, that should make a difference. Despite lockdown, there are still some people working. There we are. Right, we can keep that for another day, because I'm sure I'll need it. Put a bracket on there so that we can secure it and slide that onto the sender unit. There we are, that's nicely done. So we just need to tighten this bracket up, and the fuel at the back of the car is buttoned up, ready to go. I say that was the fuel pump buttoned up. Of course, it was underneath the car. I want to finish the job properly today, so we need to wire it up, the black and the white wires, and plumb this thing in properly so it's wired into the car. So when we turn the ignition, obviously it'll run. Now, I don't like the look of these connectors. Well, I mean, one of the things obviously you need to rely on is when you turn the ignition on, you've got good electrical contacts with all the parts that you need to not only start the car, but clearly keep it running and run the electrics, like the wipers and the lights and the heater if you need it, and all the rest of it. These look a bit gammy, these spade connectors, so I'm going to change them, and I'm going to change them for, I don't have any other spade connectors, so I'm going to change them for bullet connectors, and they work in exactly the same way. It's just a male and a female, and they just slide together, so that I don't want to do a permanent join, because clearly if we have a problem with the fuel pump in the future, or indeed the wiring, and something needs to be changed, I want to be able to disconnect it if I can. So I just want to put the male connectors onto the fuel pump first, and it really is as simple as a snippet. These are brilliant, by the way. Instead of trying to use the snips or the pliers, these cable separators are absolutely fantastic, and they're not fantastically expensive, but they are brilliant and save so much time, and also save so much wiring, because the amount of wire that I've wasted because the pliers, I've been too energetic with the pliers. And then just crimp one, and this is the black wire, another bullet connector there. I try and do, if we're connecting, let's do bullets to males to females rather than one male and one female. It's just the way I've always done things. Just seems to me to be fairly logical that you'd keep the same junction on the same set of wires. Crimp those together. There we are. So we've got the male ends. Let's just take these off. One there. Now this has got a bit of insulation on it, so I'm just going to take the wire out of there for a moment or two. I can tidy that up in a moment. Also ensures that you've got clean wiring as well, which is Really, again, very, very important. I mean, this car's clearly not going to get the use now that it had when it was new. Who knows, someone might buy it and use it as an everyday commuter, but it's not likely to get the level of use. So by cleaning up the wires now, you almost ensure that they're going to be good for so many years to come. You can slide that insulation back down a bit there. There we are. Just turn them like that. In goes that female connector. Crimp that, and there we have it. 2 male ends and 2 female ends. So, black to black. Now this is black and red. The live on the pump is black and red. The live on the car to the fuel feed is white. I've checked that out. I know that that's correct. So there we are. Pump is wired up. This is the cover that goes over that hides everything and makes it look tidy, and I'll tidy those away when I finish up doing the loom. I'm not going to put the cover on yet because I need to get the big Jubilee clip, the big clamp that holds the fuel tank, or secures the fuel pump rather, in place. I mean, it's very solidly in there, but let's not tempt fate. Well, I'll wait, I'll get a new Jubilee clip and it'll be in there nice and securely. So to all intents and purposes, bar that clamp, we're done. So the next thing I want to do is to put this on. This is the pipe that leads from the engine into the heater box. So clearly, I mean, you've got the roof down, you're still in this country, sadly, still going to need some heat most of the time. The thing is, 2 things. Firstly, this rocker box is a bit crappy. And secondly, the bolts on here, well, firstly, there's a spacer missing from one. And secondly, it won't allow you to put this on and have enough clearance. This will be fouling on the rocker cover itself. So I needed to get new bolts, which I've done, and they come in a kit of parts like this. And it basically is a spacer. These go into the rocker cover themselves. You might just be able to see them there. So I've got a new rubber and a new plate there, a new spacer, which we'd need anyway. And then these go down. And the thing is, what they'll enable me to do is to, when they're bolted in, this will be able to go over the top, and that means it has clearance above the rocker cover. But one of the things that also came with the car is a new rocker cover itself, and it's a rather nice one. Alloy. It's lovely. I've started to polish it, but because as you can see, it's well, it's been sitting around for a few years by the looks of things, and I've just started to that was literally 10 minutes work that was a little hard work, to be honest, with Autosol, which is something I always swear about. That metal polish is just absolutely brilliant. However, I have decided that I've bitten the bullet and I've bought a machine polisher, you know, like a bench polisher. So I think it's time we see if we can actually bring this up to make it look like that, if not better, before we put it on the car. Well, apart from the fact that it's covering me, and I think I probably need a slightly wider polishing pad, it's not doing too badly. There's quite a difference, and that was, as you saw, 2 or 3 minutes just doing on that one bit. So I'm going to carry on doing this. Join me the other side of it. It could be in 5 minutes. It could be this time next week. Who knows? But I'll come back when I've finished it. Well, it's actually taken me about 40 minutes. It's not perfect, but I have to say I'm not that unhappy with that at all. For an alloy head that's clearly been around the block a few times. It's come up really, really nicely, and I think will, well, of course, it'll brighten up the engine bay no end, so we need to go and make sure we get it on the car. First thing we've got to do, obviously, is get the old one off, and it'll be interesting, this, because it'll be the first time I've seen, albeit only the top of it, but inside the engine. So we'll undo these bolts and see what is left for us. I'm hoping that all I'm going to see is black, oily valves and springs and tappets. Of course, it could be so much more. I've not opened, as I say, I've not opened this engine. I don't know what's in it. I'm told that there is nothing wrong with it at all. Well, yeah, you take so much on trust, don't you? And I've got no reason to disbelieve anything that was told to me. Right, there we are. That's, get those out of the way, because I don't want those falling in. Obviously, I've got fresh bolts to go in. And there we are. Just get rid of that for a second. There we are. Well, at least I'm expecting to see, or I'm seeing what I'm expecting to see. It's oily. It doesn't look too bad, to be honest. I mean, it hasn't seen oil. There's no oil in the engine, so it's not looking too bad. What I want to do is just to clean up. There's obviously been gasket sealant on here. You can see the remnants of it. And clearly, I'm not going to put the new rocker cover on without a new gasket. So I've got a new gasket on there, but I need to get rid of the remnants of all this old sealer. It does seem to be just to be peeling off a bit, peeling off quite easily. So I will get that done. It's just, I mean, it could have been a lot more difficult to get this sealer off, but there's not much left on there as far as I can see. There's nothing untoward really that I can see at the top of the head, which is good news. I've got a new gasket to go on for that. Again, this came with the car. And then, here I've got my hands nice and dirty. I'm about to pick up a nicely polished head now, aren't I? Let's see if I can get it on without... Look at that. Doesn't that make a difference to the engine? Wow. Right, well, that's that tightened down to the correct torque. The only thing left to do as far as putting it on is concerned is adding the lid. Now, to get this pipe on. This is an interesting one. The pipe, you can probably see, is fouling on the oil filler cap. Now, if I take that off, that clears it nicely. But you can't get that filler cap on. That's very strange. Now, I know that this is obviously brand new, and it came from an MG specialist, so I know that this is right. The only thing I can think of is it's obviously made to go onto the older ones, which has a higher filler lip, and the lid goes over the top. It just protrudes slightly over the top of that pipe. So the only fix for this, I think, well, we have two options. Put the other rocker cover back on. No thanks. Or elongate this hole slightly so that it gives us the clearance that we need. Because even if we put this on first and then put the cap on, which would be a struggle, means we have to move this every time we need to fill up with oil, which, you know, is not going to be right. So let's have a go at elongating this hole and seeing if we can get this to fit. Right, well, I've drilled this out to about as far as I can go. Look at that. Oh, that's brilliant. Excellent. It's close. but it's not touching. Oh, that's a great job done. Very pleased with that. And we should be able to, there, we can take that off and put it back on, and it's there and it's not interfering with anything. Wonderful. I still don't know why there is that kink in the pipe. There is in the other ones as well, because I've checked on the GT, and it's there and it's in the same place. Maybe one of you can tell me, because I don't know what that is. Anyway, so now we can, obviously I need a Jubilee clip, but that will go on there and be able to fill the heater, which I'm just in the process of repairing, and then obviously the car will, fingers crossed, have heat. But I do need your help with something. The problem I've got is fixing the heater box into the car. Now, those of you who know MGs will know that it bolts through onto this bulkhead, and the air gets from underneath in the flaps, and that's fine. And this area underneath it is completely inaccessible when you're trying to bolt it through, hence captive nuts here. The problem I have is that whoever took the heater box off has completely annihilated the captive nuts. There is no way that anything is going to bolt into those. They've virtually disappeared. And the holes are so big, clearly I can't use self-tapping screws. So have you come across this problem before? And if you have, how have you overcome this? The heater box is virtually ready to go back in. And as you can see, there's really not a lot more to do to get this engine running. But I would like to connect up all the water hoses, obviously, before I try and start it. I know there are one or two other things to do, but I would like to get all those hoses connected. So can you help me work that out? My thought, and maybe you could tell me whether you think this is right or not, is having to drill other holes through here to take self-tapping screws. But if you could let me know, and leave a comment in the comment section, because I'd be really grateful. It's been worrying me, and I'm really keen to get this done, because the next major thing in this, really, in the engine bay anyway, is to get that heater box on, the oil cooler, the cooler pipes, and small bits and pieces before we try and turn the old girl over for the first time in 3 years. So if you can help me out with that, I'd be ever so grateful. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you again to the new subscribers. Please tell your friends, particularly if they're into classic cars, and especially MGs and MGBs. Like, subscribe, comment. I really, really would love to see your comments, and I'll try and reply to as many of them as I possibly can. And we'll see you next time. Cheerio.